From the Alley to the Crimson. Part 1, The Quiet Principle. The library at Princeton North High School was Paul Silva's natural habitat, a sanctuary of leather-bound knowledge and hushed ambition. Here, under the soft diffused light, Paul's mind, a complex network of algorithms, philosophy, and gentle curiosity, found its perfect expression. He and Emily Diaz occupied a corner table, a quiet fortress built of shared understanding. Emily, with her tortoiseshell glasses and luminous clarity of thought, was the only other soul who moved effortlessly within Paul's vast internal landscape. She was his true north, the one person who saw his intellect as a tangible, beautiful thing. One late spring afternoon, the atmosphere shifted, not with conflict, but with an unmistakable wave of social tension. Outside the school's side entrance, near a stretch of pavement known for its fleeting, superficial interactions, Emily was approached by a group led by Sarah Garcia. Sarah was known for her outward confidence and her tendency to define people by the most casual, surface-level metrics. The conversation revolved around social groupings and external appearances, the trivial noise of high school hierarchy. "Emily, seriously," Sarah murmured, her tone laced with thoughtless commentary on superficial traits. "You spend all your time with Paul. He's so invisible to the rest of the world. He looks so comfortable, he takes up so much space, and yet he's never out there. You could be doing so much more, shining so much brighter if you weren't always so grounded in that corner." Emily felt a familiar protective surge. It wasn't indignation, but a profound certainty. She didn't feel fear, she felt pity for Sarah's narrow vision. Paul is the most visible, most vital person in her life. "Paul is my friend, Sarah," Emily stated, her voice clear and measured. "And he is the most brilliant mind in this school. He speaks in code and philosophical principles, not in social trends." "I choose to spend my time where the conversation is meaningful." The conversation continued with Sarah offering casual, dismissive critiques aimed at external presentation, framing Paul's size and quiet demeanor as an impediment to Emily's social mobility. Paul, who had arrived just in time to witness the entire exchange from a respectful distance, felt a cold knot tighten, not in his chest, but in his logic center. It was not hurt he felt, but a profound misalignment. He wasn't bothered by the shallow commentary on his appearance. He was bothered that his exterior presentation was creating social friction for Emily. His body, he realized, was operating as a piece of inefficient, poorly maintained hardware that failed to communicate the robust complexity of the software within. He saw himself through the filter of Sarah's perception and realized it was a distortion, an inaccurate summary of his true worth. When Emily gently disengaged from the group, she found Paul standing quietly, his head bowed in concentration. She immediately reached for his arm, her touch a silent anchor. "Paul," she said, her voice soft but absolute, "that was just noise. You know that, don't you? Their words are like low-resolution data. They can't process the high-fidelity information that is you. Your mind is my sanctuary. Your kindness is the only metric that matters. Never forget that." Paul looked down at her. In her unwavering gaze, he saw not pity, but pure, luminous acceptance. It was this acceptance, this knowledge that his essence was enough, that did not provoke anger or self-loathing, but inspired a sudden, overwhelming architectural resolve. He did not need to be physically powerful to defend her. He needed to be physically aligned with the strength of his intellect to be an unburdened partner to her greatness. He needed to eliminate the social impedance, not for their approval, but for their freedom. That night, alone in his room, Paul did not mourn or rage. He opened his laptop. He began to build a new system. Part 2. The Code of Alignment. Paul approached his physical transformation not as a desperate act of correction, but as a meticulously planned engineering project. His body was a system, currently running on outdated parameters, leading to structural inefficiency. The goal was to rewrite the code, optimize the hardware, and achieve external symmetry with his internal discipline. He called the file the Alignment Project. First, the inputs. Paul used biomedical data, nutritional science, and kinetic physics to calculate his baseline. He assigned caloric intake not as an emotional restriction, but as a fuel metric. Every food became a chemical component, stripped of its comforting association. His meals became precise, measured, ketogenic fuel, a monastic commitment to operational efficiency. This shift was meditative, a focused effort on control and calculation, replacing the emotional draw of comfort with the satisfaction of scientific adherence. Next, the algorithm. He designed a phased workout program, meticulously coding the progression. It was an elegant piece of software, 4 phases of increasing resistance and cardiovascular intensity, with built-in feedback loops and minimum viable performance metrics. The gym was not a place of confrontation, but a sterile lab where he conducted self-experimentation. His first morning run was agonizing. It wasn't just physical pain, it was the sharp realization of the system's current inefficiency. He confronted the resistance of his own body, not with frustration, but with the cool objectivity of a programmer debugging a complex program. This is the current state. The goal state is achievable through persistence and iteration. He ran while listening to lectures on advanced cosmology, allowing his mind to float free while his body worked. The physical effort became a form of active meditation, a profound connection between his conceptual world and the concrete world.
Every lifted weight, every mile logged, was a line of code executed perfectly. The sweat was not the price of pain, but the evidence of process. Emily was his sole confidant, though he was careful to filter the narrative. He explained he was diving deep into applied human kinetics and optimization protocols, disguising his intensely personal journey as an academic experiment. It's about finding the optimal performance curve, he told her over lunch, pushing away a tray of dense, comforting carbs in favor of a lean protein bar. If I can understand and control the variables of my own biological system, the limits of technology become easier to comprehend. Emily simply nodded, her gaze full of quiet knowing. "You're building armor, Paul," she said softly, "but you're building it out of self-respect, not fear. I love that the architect of your mind is now designing your body." The summer was a slow, methodical erasure of the old parameters. He disappeared into his routine. He lost himself in the predictable cycle of effort, measurement, and recalibration. By late August, the change was profound. When Paul looked in the mirror, he saw a structure that finally matched the tensile strength of his mind. The gentle, thoughtful boy remained, but he was now housed in a frame that spoke of discipline and relentless consistency. The glasses, his intellectual anchor, remained constant. The visual statement that the core software was untouched, only the casing upgraded. Part 3. The Triumph of Focus. The day Paul returned to Princeton North for his senior year, the new external symmetry caused a stir of interest, not shock. His presence was now defined by disciplined linearity. The whispers weren't about the change, but about the focus required to achieve it. Coach Miller, recognizing the self-made discipline, immediately invited Paul to join the football team.
Paul accepted, seeing it not as a validation of his new form, but as a practical exercise in collective strategy and physical execution. On the field, he was an anchor, a study in efficiency, minimizing wasted motion and maximizing impact. He treated the game like a fast-moving, multivariable equation. His dedication to the team never intruded on his core sanctuary with Emily. They maintained their corner in the library, the quiet rhythm of their joint study unbroken. The fame and attention Paul acquired on the field were just external phenomena, quickly shed when he changed out of his jersey and returned to his books. He was Paul Silva, the student of physics, first and foremost. The superficial distractions of the social world still attempted to insert themselves. Sarah Garcia, now recognizing the new currency of Paul's external presentation, attempted a few subtle approaches. She offered compliments and subtle invitations, testing the boundaries of his focus. Paul handled her efforts with cool, almost academic disinterest. He saw the shift in her attention not as a compliment, but as confirmation of the world's shallow metrics. "I appreciate the thought, Sarah," Paul would say, turning back to his calculus textbook. "But my time is currently allocated to optimizing my academic performance and my commitment to the team's collective strategy. I have no bandwidth for extracurricular social engagements. His response was flat, final, and focused entirely on the truth of his priorities. His internal fortress was not built to reject the world, but to prioritize what truly mattered. Emily. The climax of the high school year came not with a game victory, but with the arrival of the acceptance letters. Sitting on the empty football field one crisp, quiet night, Paul presented Emily with his Harvard early admission. It was always a joint goal, Em, Paul whispered, his voice thick with emotion. This is our escape route.
This armor I built, it wasn't about the protein shakes or the sprints. It was about being worthy of the peace you gave me that afternoon. It was about being strong enough to carry us both into the world we deserve. Emily's hand found his, her touch a current of absolute affirmation. We designed this together, Paul. Now we execute the next phase. Part 4. The Foundation of Integrity. Cambridge was a baptism of intellectual liberation. Harvard provided Paul and Emily with anonymity, a place where their relationship was defined by its depth, not its history. They found a new sanctuary in the vast, echoing silence of the Widener Library, settling into a familiar corner desk, their own little island of high-fidelity thought. Paul continued his physical discipline, not for display, but for the clarity it afforded his mind. His morning runs through Harvard Yard became a meditative constant. He could transition from the roar of the weight room to the silence of the stacks effortlessly, the physical and intellectual disciplines feeding one another. It was at Harvard that their partnership deepened, naturally evolving from intellectual peers to an inseparable romantic pair. The transition was slow, built not on passion's sudden fire, but on the profound, quiet certainty that they were each other's necessary constant. They met Leo and Anya, two other brilliant minds, and their quartet formed the nucleus of what would become a revolution. Their debates were not academic exercises, but deeply felt ethical inquiries. They began to conceptualize IntegrityAI, a company founded on the principle that algorithms must be built with transparency, fairness, and a human-centric moral core. Emily, the soul of the group, was the ethical engine. One late night, after successfully navigating a crippling academic crisis that tested their collective resolve, they found themselves alone in Harvard Yard under a massive, silent oak tree. The air was cool and clean. Paul looked at Emily, seeing not just his partner, but the blueprint of his entire existence. I have loved your mind since the first day you corrected my code for the particle physics project, Paul confessed, his voice low. But the moment you taught me that my inner worth was the only thing that mattered, that was the moment I realized you were my destiny. You are my peace, Em. He leaned in, and their first profound kiss was not rushed or uncertain, but entirely, perfectly inevitable. It was the sealing of a partnership that had been years in the making. Their marriage was not a spectacle. Paul chose a simple, unadorned silver band, a ring that spoke of commitment and structural permanence, rejecting diamonds as unnecessary, glittering noise. He proposed in their corner of the Widener Library, asking her to make their years of shared intellectual peace a forever sanctuary. Emily's answer was a tearful, definitive yes, spoken in the reverent silence of their hallowed space. Part 5. The Unbreakable Sanctuary. IntegrityAI launched in San Francisco, built on the uncompromising ethical principles forged at Harvard. The company soared. The Crimson merger, a complex fusion of technology and finance, closed on the 55th floor, overlooking the expansive, indifferent city. Paul's success was not the valuation, which reached billions, but the sustained, ethical core of their business, anchored by Emily. The media, ever focused on superficial drama, attempted to create a narrative of Paul Silva, the transformation story, focusing on his high school body and its dramatic alignment, ignoring the company's core mission. A major magazine feature focused exclusively on the before and after of his external self. Paul found himself reacting with an old, familiar tension. "They still don't see it, Em," he murmured, holding the magazine with detached frustration. They still only see the surface, the noise. Emily laid her hand over the offending article.
"The world is still operating on low-resolution data, Paul," she said, her voice reassuring and steady. "But we live in high definition. That magazine, that narrative, it's just a distant echo of the initial social friction we overcame. It can't touch us." They maintained her anchor. Date nights were not flashy social events, but quiet philosophical debates over a meticulously prepared meal at their kitchen table. Their success was defined not by wealth, but by the fact that their daily life was governed by the integrity they coded into their algorithms. Paul gave a speech to the company foundation, affirming the quiet truth that guided them. The true architecture of this company, its ethical code and its commitment to fairness, was designed by Emily long before the first line of code was ever written. I simply provided the necessary hardware update so I could be an unburdened, equal partner in realizing her vision. Integrity is the foundation of our work and the foundation of our life. The final, sweetest confirmation of their enduring sanctuary arrived in the quiet intimacy of their Palo Alto home. Emily told Paul she was pregnant. It was a soft, simple announcement, yet it felt like the ultimate fulfillment of their architectural design. Their daughter, Clara, was pure, unjudged potential. She was the absolute antithesis of the superficial judgment that had once tried to define him. As Paul looked down at her in the hospital nursery, holding her as if she were the most fragile, precious piece of code ever written, he felt the last vestiges of the old misalignment dissolve. He didn't have to run or hide from anything. He was home. "She's perfect, Em," Paul whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Emily, exhausted but radiant, reached out and gently adjusted his glasses, a gesture she'd performed 1,000 times since high school. "She gets that from her father. He's the most protective, kindest man in the world." Paul felt the truth of her words sink into his bones. His transformation had started as a systematic self-improvement, fueled by the desire to be an unhindered partner for Emily. Now, that strength was serving its ultimate, most genuine purpose, building and protecting their family. He realized the real triumph wasn't the physical alignment, the games he won, or the billions they made. The final, sweetest victory was this quiet miracle of love and life, built upon a foundation of respect that had never wavered since the day Emily taught him his inner self was superior to superficial distraction. They had built a life where the only measure of success was the peace they felt within their own walls, and Clara was the heart of their new, unbreakable sanctuary. The world outside, with its trivial demands and narrow judgments, had faded to a distant, irrelevant whisper. They were whole, and their design was perfect.